I am waiting for specific information.
Sababu za kupinga zinajulikana. Waingereza mnazijua na watu wanazijua.
Aluta continua.
Coup que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir.
لا يمكن نسمح لليبيا تضيع بين ايدينا.
Uganda is now a free country.
Hello, many thanks for watching Face Africa, the hub of knowledge. My name is Jean Thiel. Welcome to our today's AFCON episode. In our today's episode, we'll be looking at the just concluded Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast. Thanks once again for watching Face to Face Africa, the hub of knowledge. As I earlier told you, in our today's episode, we'll be looking at the just concluded Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast. To begin this episode, allow me to make one thing clear. I'm not a professional football analyst. I do have little knowledge about football. This means that in our today's episode, we shall not focus on the football aspect of this tournament, but we will look beyond football itself. What other lessons can we draw from the just concluded Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast? Let's begin with the host nation itself, Ivory Coast. Was Ivory Coast successful in hosting the Africa Cup of Nations tournament? Did Ivory Coast do a good job? Did the government do the right job to make sure they host a successful tournament in their country? According to me, this is my opinion. I believe Ivory Coast did host a successful continental football tournament. It was a successful one. The government did all it could to make sure they host a successful tournament in their country, Ivory Coast. According to some estimates, some figures, they say that Ivory Coast actually did invest almost $1 billion in preparations for this year's Africa Cup of Nations tournament. They renovated the stadiums and built other infrastructures that were needed for them to have a successful tournament in their nation, to host the Africa Cup of Nations tournament. So according to me, Ivory Coast did an excellent job. What do we learn from this? As I told you, we are looking beyond the football aspect. I have one lesson that we can learn from this. Whenever we have the political will to do something in Africa, we do it. We do it rightly, correctly, perfectly. That's how we do it in Africa. Look at Ivory Coast. It did all it could to make sure it hosts a successful tournament. That means there was the right political will to do the job. So this is something we always do in Africa. Is it right? Yes, it's right. But what can we learn from this? And the lesson I think that we can learn from this is we need to have political will in doing almost everything that will make the lives of our people better. You get my point? We just need to have this political will in other areas too. It's a question for me and for you. You could be a citizen or a leader in Africa. Don't we have a need for better roads, better infrastructures, better railways? We do have a need for these things. What do we lack? The political will to do the job. Don't we have a need for the right education system in our nations, on our continent? What about the health sector? We need all these things, but we lack one thing, the political will. I would like to tell you one thing. It's not all about lack of funds. Trust me, it's sometimes about lack of the political will. Let us learn from this. Ivory Coast was able, very able, to host a successful tournament. Without seeking anyone's help, the government had the much needed political will to do this job. This can inspire us to do the same thing in other areas too. We just need to have the political will to do the job. And I believe we have a reason. We have a serious reason or serious reasons to have this much needed political will to do the job in other areas too. This is also common in our own homes. Actually, think about your own family, an African family. Whenever you'll have a visitor, a ceremony, you tend to do all your best to prove a point. You tend to do all your best in preparation for the visitor or in the organization of the ceremony you'll be hosting. That's part of us. That's how we do things in Africa. Think about the last time your family was visited by some uncles, in-laws, or other relatives, or a big family friend. Think about how your parents, or even yourself, organized your home, cleaned the house, organized everything in the living room, cleaned the compound. It's not that you don't clean the house, you do clean the house regularly. You do clean the compound all the time. But when you'll have a visitor, you do it a little bit much better. You try to become a little bit extravagant in doing the same thing you always do all the time. That's how we do things in Africa. Whenever there is a function, a big function or something will happen in the country, we tend to develop the political will to do the job the right way. May we please have this attitude, this courage, this political will to do the job even when we don't have such functions like the football tournament taking place in our nations. Let's do the right thing all the time. Let us do the great job all the time. Let us have this kind of political will to do the job all the time, because we have many areas that we need to have such a political will for us to do a great job. That's the lesson number one. The second lesson is about the football management of our national teams. Before I talk about Ivory Coast, I'll just go back a little bit to Senegal. In 2022, Senegal did win the Africa Cup of Nations tournament that was hosted by Cameroon. Who was the coach of Senegal at that time? It's their son Cissé, a Senegalese national, legendary footballer, who was given an opportunity to serve his nation, and he led his country, Senegal, to glory in 2022 in Cameroon. He is still their national coach. This year, the same thing happened in Ivory Coast. At the very beginning of the tournament, Ivory Coast had a French coach. They had a poor performance in the group stages. They won their first game, lost their second game, and lost their third game. But the third game, they were really, really smashed. 4-0. Trust me, they were beaten 4-0. The host nation was beaten. I think it was Equatorial Guinea that did punish them by hitting them badly, 4-0. They didn't change the squad, but they did one thing. They sacked the coach and got their own son, their own legend, football legend, and gave him a chance to serve his country. That is none other than Emerse Faye. I hope I got his name right. This coach was given the job to take care of Ivory Coast at a time when we all thought that Ivory Coast didn't have anywhere to go. We all thought that Ivory Coast was getting out of the competition at such a very early stage. But luckily, Ivory Coast made it to the next stage, knockout stages, by being among the 4 best losers, I would say, because they were among the 4 teams that were in the third place that had good points. So they made it to the knockout stages. They went to the next stage, quarterfinals, then semifinals. Ivory Coast found itself in the finals. under the management of their own son, Emase Faye. What do we learn from this? We learn one thing. Whenever we have capable and men with potential to serve our continent, to serve our nations in Africa, let us always give them a chance to do the job. I would love to say one thing. Before we look outwards for such people, let's first look inwards. Do we have them locally? Do we have such people in our countries? If they do exist, let us give them a job. Emase Faye is such an example that Africans can do it. I'm not trying to advocate for only employing Africans in Africa. That's not true. I do not live in Africa myself. I live in Sweden and I'm working. All I'm saying is that before we look outwards, before we think about employing foreigners, let's think about our own people. If we have people with the needed skills, capabilities, people who are ready with the right education to do the job, let us employ them. So let's look beyond football. Let's talk about our engineers. When are we going to start trusting our African engineers and give them jobs to build our bridges, build or construct our roads, build our government buildings? When are we going to start trusting them? I was so glad to see recently in Uganda, they are renovating their national stadium, Nambole National Stadium, and they are using their UPDF, their national army, to do the job. Local people are working on their national stadium to renovate their national stadium in Uganda. It's called Nambole National Stadium. It's the UPDF, which is the Uganda People's Defense Forces, doing that job. Local engineers. So I'm not trying to advocate that Africans should only employ Africans, that all African national teams should give jobs to their citizens. Not at all. If he is a Frenchman who is the potential, who is competent to do the job more than your own citizens, then all you want is good results. Then give the Frenchman a job to do, or the American, or the Chinese, any foreigner. My point is simple and very clear. Let's give the capable men and women of Africa an opportunity to serve. And I'm saying let's look beyond football. This time it has been about the football national teams, two of them, Senegal and Ivory Coast, giving their football legends a chance to serve their nations. And both of them have produced results, have led their national teams to glory. We can do the same thing in other areas too, in other fields, I mean. Remember what I told you. Here on Face Africa, we shall be focusing on the success story of Africa, on the things being done the right way in Africa. And that's what I've just done. I've talked about a successful tournament that was hosted by Ivory Coast, and I've talked about Ivory Coast doing a great job. But I've just also talked about how we can learn from this by telling you that Ivory Coast had the political will to do this job. That's why they succeeded. And I just said again, we need the same political will in other areas too, to make sure we do the right thing. We do some great jobs in our countries. I've also talked about giving the Africans a chance to coach their national teams and how these Africans have been proving a point by leading their national teams to glory. And I've just made one suggestion here, that it would be much better for Africans to always give Africans a chance to serve. Whenever we have men and women with capabilities, with potential, competent enough to do the job, we should always give them the opportunity to serve their continent. Before we look outwards to get people to work in Africa, to employ foreigners, foreign companies, let us look inwards and see if we have such people, such companies home, locally in Africa. And if they do exist, let us give them a chance to serve. Last and not least, I may sound to be like a motivational speaker, but I'm not one. We can also learn another one lesson from the Ivory Coast football national team. At the very beginning of the tournament, when other nation teams were running, Ivory Coast was walking. And when the other teams were walking, Ivory Coast was crawling. It wasn't easy for Ivory Coast. It was such a tough tournament. They were the hosts, but they looked like they were going nowhere. But one thing Ivory Coast didn't do is they never gave up. They kept on fighting. They kept on fighting. They did all the changes they had to do, but they didn't give up. Ivory Coast kept its eyes on the prize. And at the end of the tournament, Ivory Coast had the prize in its hands. This is a lesson to me and you. Let us always keep our eyes on the prize. If we do not give up, one day we shall have the prize in our hands. That's all I had for you today. If this is your first time to visit this platform, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember also to share with us your thoughts in the comment section. Like and share this video with your friends. My name is Jean Tilniwe. Till we meet again, bye-bye for now.
I am waiting for specific information.
Sababu za kupinga zinajulikana. Waingereza mnazijua na watu wanazijua.
La lutte continua.
Coup que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir.
لا يمكن نسمح لليبيا تضيع بين ايدينا.
Uganda is now a free country.
Audio